So congratulations, Greg. End of day one. It's been a blisteringly hot day.
Yes.
Not too hot inside, but it was packed out today, and there was it felt like a bit of electricity in the room. There were some good bits and some less good bits, but what were your three sort of main takeaways that we can then explore from further on?
So, three takeaways. I think the first one is it was a good turnout. Sometimes you never quite know how the mood will take it, but we're post the dip. So from a UK perspective, there's no more news, except there probably is some. We might find out tomorrow, actually. But there's also the fact that the Air show is not quite the show it would have been, for obvious reasons. So maybe we have become a bit more of a box office draw. But I think you're right. The buzz thing, you're right. There is something going on, and I think it is two things. One is the genuine fact that we now all believe we face a real threat, and therefore this is serious. We're not just talking theory. We're talking about real practical problems. And secondly, we've now got people talking in the Alliance, thinking about how they go through that process. But we've got a real sense now of urgency in the way technology is beginning to become almost sort of not imposed, that's the wrong word, but there's a real weight here of how can you adopt this new technology and adopt it quickly, because if you can't, then the other guy will. So those would be my three takeaways.
Yeah, I think that was palpable, because you and I, it's your 10th one, isn't it, I think?
Yeah.
And it's felt in the past sometimes there are a good chance for the chiefs to get together. There's over 60 service chiefs are here, and there's huge value in that. I'm not diminishing that at all, but it does feel that we're in a very much more dangerous world. There are a lot of industry there. There were some really interesting perspectives. Certainly some of the conversations in the corridors outside feel much more focused on, actually, this is a whole of enterprise approach to defence now, rather than just the three main services going about their business.
Yeah, there's more excitement. Maybe it's tension rather than excitement. I mean, the good old days, you had contracts, you let them. They took years to come to fruition. They then took years to deliver. So the pace was very slow. That is not the world we occupy now. Yes, there are some things that take a long time to do, but a lot of this stuff is really quite fast and snappy.
Before we get onto the main topics, just that one though, it feels like technology is the big area. We're talking AI, we're talking about most of that technology and innovation comes with SMEs. It comes with smaller companies. Yep. This place still feels like it's dominated by some of the bigger companies. They're the sponsors, don't get me wrong. These things don't happen without the big boys.
Yep.
How do you get that balance right across defence?
It's a very fair call. I mean, what you don't see, of course, is, yes, you've got the sponsors' names, and most of them are sort of household names. Not all, actually. There are some new ones creeping in there that are beginning to sort of gain prominence. What you don't see is the SMEs represented by individuals in that room, and the SMEs who are watching online, who are, understandably don't have the money necessarily all the time to be able to attend a 2-day conference in London. They're too busy earning a crust. Yeah. So, I think the word is spreading out. More importantly, you heard today from some of the service chiefs about how they are going out and seeing these businesses operate for real. So there's a real sense now of a connection between defence and those types of businesses.
Yeah, whether or not we can get the procurement system to reflect that. Anyway, going back to some of the headlines, I was particularly struck, no great surprises, the nuclear conversation, because there's so much to this, not least of which, we're buying F-35As. Does that actually mean we're going to end up buying American nuclear weapons with all that entails? Is it simply a door open that we could do that in the future? Yeah. How we're going to use them and the like. I thought was fascinating, though, is that in the margins of that, obviously it's also open to the media. And there's been quite a lot of interest around the friction points around this, what the British government aim is, what the military aim is. Why is there this sort of debate about something so important?
So I think some people are looking for a story.
Yeah.
I mean, and we heard it, so I'm not going to mention names, but another journalist brought up the issue of A's versus B's and was it a conspiracy, etc. I think everyone needs to calm things down a little bit. There are very good reasons why the A model on the conversion unit provides a more cost-effective way of training pilots. So that argument stands on its own. The fact that those aircraft also have a nascent capability to load an American weapon is kind of like not a free good, but it's definitely an added bonus. There was a debate today about which came first and what was the prime reason. It almost doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. And I think you're right, though. I think downstream, there's more conversations to be had. In fact, I can say this. Can I say it? Was he off record? I won't say his name just in case. I nearly said it.
I was going to say, just in case.
It is, if the promise of CCAs, these drones,
Collaborative combat aircraft, for
that
those.
word,
Yep.
if they become true, and there's a strong belief now that they are not only going to come true, they already are, that allows you to make a very different investment choice on B models, particularly on deck, but also elsewhere, which might allow you to shift your investment into more A models or another platform. So yeah, the idea that the number that we thought of, what was it? You were on the program 20 years ago. What was it? You know, the 138 or whatever the figure was.
Yeah.
Why is that still golden today or in 10 years' time?
The only reason it was golden was because there was work share that was associated with it, and therefore we are.
And we did the same thing with Typhoon, and then we ended up selling off our ones to other coalitions.
But the elephant in the room here, in a way, is the F-35B and the carrier debate. I'm not suggesting we open that one up now, but I was really interested, and we'll come on to it later, watching what the Royal Navy are doing here, because if you were starting from scratch today, you had none of our military capability.
Yep.
I'm pretty confident you wouldn't buy two of the largest carriers, because you need four of them as a minimum, because you've got to have one available at all times, and that's what we do, the continuous at-sea deterrent. And secondly, it's not just about the carrier, it's all the rest of the stuff around them. And therefore, just because we've got two of the biggest carriers doesn't necessarily mean that's the answer for the Royal Navy going forward. I think there's a very positive future for the Navy. We are a maritime nation, the threat from the high north and the like. But the danger is this whole F-35B conversation seems to guide us where we've got to man the carrier because we've got it.
Yeah.
Whereas air power, that's one runway of thousands that are actually available.
I think it's one of those traps you fall into, that when you bought a platform like a carrier that has got a 50, 60 year lifespan, you know, the idea that you're going to use it the same in 60 years as you use it on day one clearly is not going to be true. If we were thinking about designing it today, we may well have designed it differently, because we'd have designed in the CCA capability. You know, how are we going to launch these drones? Well, it might have been using a catapult, or it's using a launcher system that you park and you land the airplanes differently. So yeah, there's lots of things you might have done. Now, the good news is we'll adapt. We'll modify them to do whatever. We've just seen them being launched off the Patrick Blackett, off the back of that thing, and it's tiny. So if you can do it off that, you can definitely do it off a carrier.
And that makes sense, because the B is such a versatile model, isn't it? But going back to the nuclear one, the other thing that I was struck by today was that who knows where we actually go with this, but the suggestion is we buy American aircraft carryable nuclear weapons. One of the things,
we won't buy them. We won't be allowed to.
No, but
we'll borrow them.
We'll borrow them.
Yeah.
But the argument is the same, is that one of the fundamental principles of our continuous at-sea deterrent is the minimum credible, independent nuclear capability. If we are carrying or using, whether we buy them or we are reliant on America, and intellectually that isn't as robust as I think it sounds.
So I'm going to call into question your phrasing of independent. And I know that a lot of people want to use that, and we still today talk about our nuclear deterrent being independent and sovereign. Although there's a debate about that because of some of the things that are done in America. We are talking here about NATO. This is on behalf of NATO. It's a NATO DCA role, not a national DCA role. And I think once you leap to that logic, you stop worrying about where the weapon's kept and who owns it. It's a NATO thing. Now, there's a second question about, would NATO ever unite to make a decision to employ a weapon, or at least threaten to employ a weapon? That's a separate conversation, but NATO has done that in the past, and certainly did it in our time. So yeah, I think once you realise it's a NATO capability, all that independent sovereign stuff goes away. I mean, why does the UK, in a NATO alliance context, need an independent nuclear weapon? Against who?
No, but in a way that we're back into that. Maybe it's a future podcast why the French do not declare theirs NATO. We do, because there is an element of.
That's very true.
If you're doing it through NATO, you need everybody to vote.
Yeah.
And you're only as good as your weakest link then. That's going to be
You're
difficult.
completely right. And if you start to wobble on Article 5, then my argument disappears in a flash.
Yeah.
So it does require you to be absolutely wedded to the idea that there's a collective defensive alliance.
And therefore, politically, you need a lot of training to make sure all of our politicians, not just ours, recognise the crucial importance that they're all singing from the same hymn sheet.
I learned this in the Libya campaign. Once you transition your forces under NATO command, you don't have control of them. They're under the NATO command and control system.
Yeah.
You've signed up to the deal. You don't get to sort of, oh, hang on a minute, I'm going to hold up my British card. So learning again how to fight as NATO at the hard edge of combat is a skill set this country has not had to think about for 50 years.
Moving on, we also had a look at space, operationalisation of space. I have to say, I know it's probably unfair to say, but I was a bit underwhelmed by that part of it. I don't know whether it was just because we play, in the big scheme of things, a relatively small part. I was reading some figures earlier. There are something like, 20-odd thousand satellites whizzing around. 3/4 of those are Elon Musk's Starlink, and they're meant to be, he's doubling the number shortly. Yep. The US are clearly a dominant force in space. Commercial is dominant. Therefore, while we have interests, they're relatively slim pickings. Was I being unfair at being underwhelmed by that, or
I think I can understand why you take that away. I mean, it was called operationalising space, and you so quickly get into classified discussions that you can't bring it to life in the way you can with aeroplanes and the what have you. So I think that's where space suffers. It's a long way away. We can't see it. We don't really appreciate it, and you can't really talk about some of the things because they're so sensitive, without realising that your ATM machines, our banking system are 100% reliant on the signal that you send from space. So you and I need to explore this. How do we bring space to life for the average punter?
Yeah, because I do understand our reliance on it, but that's admiring the problem.
Yeah.
The question is, how do we raise the spectre of what we could do about it without immediately getting into that? I always use the example of things like stealth. Having been requirements manager, you're led into all sorts of rooms that you're not allowed to talk about, and you have to look at the light flashing and forgets everything type Men in Black. But the harsh reality, you can still talk about stealth, you just can't talk about the numbers.
Yeah.
I can talk about what stealth is, but I can't tell you how big the golf ball is or whatever. It's and that therefore we've got to find a way, it feels.
You've got to remember, I mean, go back a few years, we didn't want to talk about drones as if they were some, magic whatever. So we do need to get over that a little bit, because I think it is important that we explain it. I think, to be fair to the Americans, they do this. They do operationalise space. It's in their DNA now. It's taken a while, but it's in their DNA. It's not yet in our DNA, partly because we don't have as much. So if we are a bit more like America, and secondly, we haven't had as long to think that through. I think tomorrow we might see a few announcements of some name changes and some initiatives that will bring space to a real hard point of, I can see it, finger it, touch it now. I now know what that is.
Sounds like a bit of old wine in new bottles, though. Let's see unless it's money and commitment and ideas and.
Yeah, I agree. It has to be done properly. You have to operationalise it. I think operationalising is really English for saying just get on with it.
Get on with it. Yeah. The next one was integration air and missile defence. They talked a bit about that today, and more a focus on how you integrate it.
Yes.
I'm not sure I particularly heard anything new there. Because there is this sense we talked about the other day that the danger is we leave the general public. We're here in central London. If you picked up anybody here, I think, if not all, the vast majority would want some sort of Iron Dome, and that's just not affordable or practical. I do think they've started to explore a bit more about the drone threat and the various different threats that were there. What was your sort of take?
I do get worried slightly that we get trapped into the drone debate because it's what everyone focuses on.
Yeah.
I mean, is it a drone that's likely to be the greatest threat to this nation? In the real sense, no, not really. It's the much harder stuff to hit, and the ballistic missiles and the cruise missiles. But drones are still a concern, and we have been dealing with those in the Middle East to a degree. I think the challenge here is the SDR did cover quite a lot of this, and so they're slightly constrained by what they can say because of what the promises are that have been made. And you're right, a lot of that early investment, the £1 billion that was allegedly put in, nearly 3/4 of that is going into C2 networks in order to join our current sensors and systems together.
Because one of the things that you brought this up, I'm going to credit you with this, but that actually the danger is a lot of the general public sort of outsource their defence to the military. I think this is an area where this is a whole of society approach, because it's about resilience. It's about when we have only one Farningdales, for example, we have to expect that's going to be targeted and it's going to be taken out.
Yeah.
So what about other critical national infrastructure? What about cables? What about electricity cables? What about substations? Having more than one is more expensive.
Yeah.
But actually, unless we do that, we're going to be vulnerable. And that's what I mean about whole society. And I think this conversation needs to extend away from Iron Dome protectors to how do we survive. And that's what we talked about. You talked about the other day.
Deterrence isn't just about shooting the thing down that comes and gets you. You could argue you've already failed at that point. Deterrence is being able to then, if you shoot me, boy, am I going to shoot you back.
Yeah.
So there's first thing. And secondly, deterrence is, I've got 74 of these things. So when you hit 3 of them, I won't be affected. But boy, am I going to be pissed off that you hit 3, and I'm going to fire at all of yours. Yeah. So if you look vulnerable, you are vulnerable. So we need to think beyond just shooting missiles out of the sky.
And the last one, which I saw, which I genuinely, you and I are both quite grey hair and old, I've not seen a stage where we've had all 4 stars, air, land and maritime and cyber, on the stage together, and sounding as if they're all on the same hymn sheet. Now, the cynic in me would say none of the 4 stars are allowed to speak in public unless they're vetted by the government, and therefore they were being given pretty strict marching instructions to be, but it sounded pretty genuine, actually.
So if a politician had sat in that room, they weren't there, clearly, I'd find it hard to see what they would have seen bad about that. I took every positive from that discussion. I heard 4 individuals being pretty damn collegiate, talking a very similar story, pitching a very similar idea about the pace of change and where they need to go. And genuinely, the humanity between the 4 of them was genuine. Yeah. They are 4 people that have grown up together in the service and think, in like-minded ways. There's some real humour and a real sense of empathy in the room. I came away from that thinking, if I wanted 4 blokes, women, whoever, running my military, I'll take those 4.
One thing that I was a bit concerned about, people sometimes talk about an integrated force as being like the US Marine Corps or Canada. And I'm not entirely sure that's what we mean by an integrated force. It doesn't mean we all wear the same uniforms and all fight in the same defence unit. What was your...
Well, that was a specific question, wasn't it? Yeah. If you're an integrated force, why don't you just become one force? I think this is such a difficult answer to give that people believe because they can't get it. It's a bit... I'm trying to think of a football analogy because I like football analogies. If you've got if you're Chelsea and you've got a women's football team, a junior football team and a men's football team, this is stupid. Let's just combine them into one team. Well, that's ridiculous. It's almost as ridiculous in the military because of the differences. And the US Marine Corps is used every time as, well, look at the US Marine Corps or look at the IDF in Israel. So those 2 issues, the US Marine Corps has a very narrow task set. Doesn't do nuclear, doesn't do strategic. So, instantly it's a tactical organisation designed to fight an integrated force in a very narrow piece of battle space. IDF, exactly the same. If that was all our task was, we could do that. But that's not how our military is designed. It's not how NATO functions. No other country does it that way. And in America, who have the United States Marine Corps, they also have an army, a navy, and an air force. So, why do they do that? So, this Marine Corps argument, I think, is actually a bit bogus. But we do probably need to get better at explaining the differences. And the chiefs, they did have an attempt at that as to why you need to learn your trade first, build up your ethos and your fighting spirit within your tribe, and then be taken out into the big wide world and then apply that in a more broad setting with your other fellow servicemen and women.
So one area which I bristled a bit, and I don't know if I bristled because I'm grey-haired and old, was the army talking about the close battle and the deep battle. Now, the close battle, I think you and I have talked about before, that I'm not entirely sure that I used to do close air support. It's so dangerous in that space now that I can't see manned aircraft doing that role. In Ukraine, it's all dominated by drones and even helicopters. I was out with a Ukrainian helicopter guy literally earlier on this week, and he was saying you just can't go in. There's a no-go. It used to be a couple of kilometres. Now it's 30k back from the front line, can't go. So I get the fact that our army colleagues are going to need to control that space. But they also talked about the deep battle and 300 or 400 kilometres behind the front line, having deep strike. And I went, hang on a minute, that doesn't feel like something that you traditionally would need to be involved in. What was your...
I chuckled there, not because of that, because I think if they've now got the equipment to strike 200, 300, 400 kilometres, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You know, why send an aeroplane if you've got a missile that will do the job? And it's much easier to coordinate, blah, blah, blah. There is a discussion there about, well, how are you coordinated? But that's a separate issue. I chuckle because if you remember, the Army, we used to have a terminal debate with the Army about how many aircraft were allocated to close air support and who controlled them. And now we've got soldiers talking about prioritising deep strike. And we're finally going, hallelujah, they finally get it. It's better to hit the logistics train 200 miles away than wait till they've dispersed and they're just off the end of my nose. So, yeah, maybe they've finally come around to what we've been telling them for years.
Yeah.
Except now it's not aeroplanes, now it's missiles.
But for me, that was... probably unfairly, but you and I, there's always been single service rivalries. A lot of that's around money, it's around how much resource you can get. And if you're looking at what the role of the British Army is in the future, if you're now starting to spend a lot of money on deep strike, first of all, they don't have the intelligence to know where that stuff is. They don't have the assets to see, hear, track, do BDA, this battle damage assessment, all that sort of stuff. It feels like it's not coherent. That's my point.
So this is quite complicated for people to understand. I'm going to start using this small battlefield between us, Sean, of about, let's say between you and me is 300 kilometres. So if you're a soldier and you're about to fight an army, you should be looking at them as deep as you possibly can. You want to know where they're coming from, where they're being commanded from, what can I hit, how can I stop them being effective here. So the deeper you go, the better. Now, a few years ago, the only way you could do that was with aeroplanes. Well, now you can do it with missiles or drones or cruise missile, whatever it might be. So there is now a debate that needs to be had within the integrated force of, okay, so what's yours and what's mine? The argument that you're putting forward is valid about, well, how do you all know what you're all up to? And how do you know? Well, that's where this so-called digital targeting web comes in, that actually you're all seeing the same picture. You all get it. And what somebody then has to do is going, the joint commander, the integrated force commander says, right, that is a priority target. What is the best system I've got in my inventory to hit that? It's a missile owned by the army, right, fire. No, it's an aeroplane flying from behind that's got this, or it's a ship that's got a whatever. So, and your operational analysis will tell you what your likely most effective way of targeting that thing is because of the electronic magnetic spectrum, the threat, etc. So the OA over time will demonstrate, operational analysis, for those who don't know, will eventually give you what that blend or mix of weapons should be. And yet that will change. I think that will require aeroplanes to do less closer in, which will free them up to do the deep stuff that the missiles can't do, which is why GCAP is such a beast.
Yeah. I just felt it was a really interesting entree into, we solved one problem, but it now creates an interesting conversation.
Well, you know
elsewhere.
this. In the good old days of closest, what we could draw lines and go, that's my box, that's your box, stay out.
Yeah.
If you start doing that, what you've done is just basically you've restricted activity. You're not integrating it. And you're right. And if you're overlapping the hundreds of kilometres, that digital targeting web has got to have you all the players on the pitch.
Yeah. No, so I think it was a really positive day. I mean, I was very struck by, it's really good to see the four leaders.
Definitely.
Because actually, you know, even though you'd say in peacetime, of course, they're going to be fighting resources. In wartime, they need to operate together. But we've had 35 years of warfare and we haven't always had good behaviour. That felt to me...
What you heard from them is they talked about the force design, and that is no longer owned by them. No. There's not a Navy force or an Air Force or an Army force design. There's a joint force design owned by the military strategic air courses. Yeah. That is actually the fundamental difference here. There is no me. There is team. There's no me in team. There's no I in team, but there is a me. I don't know. But yeah, it is now a proper team game.
And then, so for tomorrow, what we got to look forward to in a couple of minutes?
Well, we have the Minister.
Yes.
I won't say who, but he is a Minister. We have the Service Chief for the USAF, or the CSAF, and we have our own Chief speaking. They're the keynote speakers. And then there's a panel after that, which is going to look at contemporary lessons from recent operations.
Wow. No,
so
high protein.
Meaty.
Yeah, high protein. No, good first day. Well done.
Very good. Thank you, Sean. I think it's about time you and I had a beer.
I think you're right.